us to you. Introducing our very special presenter today, Monica Moore is a community educator from the Mary S. Easton Center of Alzheimer's Research and Care at UCLA. She has worked in the field of aging and Alzheimer's disease for over 20 years, focusing on community education, outreach, and caregiver support. And she holds a master's degree in gerontology from California State University, Long Beach, and a certificate in gerontology from Sonoma State University. Please join me in welcoming Monica.
Hi, everybody. Thank you, Charlene. Thank you, everybody, for being here today and taking time out of your schedule to join us. So I am presenting today on living a brain healthy lifestyle. So, I encourage all of you to please, if you have questions or if you have thoughts or anything like that, put it in the chat. There will be some times that I may ask for some audience participation. So if you are willing and able, either put information in the chat so we can have a little bit of engagement today. So it's not just a matter of me sitting here talking at you, and actually I'll be talking with you today. As you know, research studies have shown that older adults learn better when they are actively engaged. So that is something that I always strive for, even in this virtual world of Zoom. I know sometimes it can be a challenge, but please definitely let's optimize our chat feature as much as we can today. So I am going to be speaking on, here's our general outline for everybody, obviously talking about what is dementia. I'm going to talk about dementia in the Japanese community, the heart-brain connection, and research on risk reduction. We'll talk a bit about dietary factors, how to keep your brain healthy, and how to stay active as long as possible. So this is, when we first talk about this, no matter the presentations that I give, I always feel that there's certain things that we need to talk about, just because we need to set the information down at a point where we're all understanding a base level of information. Let's sort of call it level setting. So when we think about some possible causes of reversible memory loss, so this is not Alzheimer's disease, this is not dementia, this is not traumatic brain injury, this is reversible memory loss. It can be medications. We live in a society where people are on lots of different medications, and medications I also include over the counter and any sort of supplements. There can be contraindications between something that your physician prescribes and then something that you get at the wellness store. So we realize that these are important things to be aware of and to have these conversations with your doctors. Also looking at depression, which is more common in the older adult population, poor nutrition, severe dehydration, thyroid problems, and high blood pressure. So if you went in for an evaluation from your doctor about your memory, they're going to look at these things. Because isn't it a lot easier to solve a thyroid problem than to manage Alzheimer's disease, right? Or to be worried that you have Alzheimer's disease for years, and then ultimately it was a thyroid problem. It's like, that's much easier. So we want to sort of handle and tackle the easier stuff first, and the things that we know what we can do with. So talking to your doctor, talking to a trusted source about your memory complaints, and seeing how can we work with people to focus on these areas. And we'll go more in depthly in these throughout the presentation. Again, looking at some other possible reversible causes of memory loss. Has anyone here, show of hands, experienced stress before in your life? Right. Okay, very good. Because if you don't have your hand up, we need to know what your secret is. So yes, absolutely. We've all experienced stress. And when you're stressed, do you think right? No, right? We're overwhelmed. We might be like, oh, shoot. Oh, I forgot to do. Oh, no, I was supposed to meet someone here. And we're sort of scattered all over the place. And it's just because of stress. It doesn't mean that you have dementia. It just means that you are stressed and you're not able to think properly and you're not able to think clearly. What about, has anyone here ever had a bad night's sleep? Right? Okay. And how do you feel the next day? A little foggy, right? Again, you're not with your A game. There might be some deficits that are happening. So we need to, again, address those types of conditions. What is causing poor night's sleep? What's causing fatigue? So how can we work on these areas and change the course of this memory loss that you are experiencing? So this area here that I always want to talk about, it's called mild cognitive impairment. So this is beyond normal aging. This is not severe enough to be Alzheimer's disease or to be a diagnosis of a disease. But it is where memory loss becomes severe enough to start impacting your life. Like you notice it. Anyone that you may live with, they're noticing small deficits. But if you were at a greater group, if we were all in person and you're hanging out with friends, they may not pick it up. But only those in your very close nuclear circle, they realize that there are some deficits that are occurring. So people with mild cognitive impairment have an increased risk of developing Alzheimer's or other types of dementias. However, not all people with mild cognitive impairment do in fact get worse. So they don't. So sometimes they can stay where they're at for a longer period of time. So again, by addressing some of the things that we'll talk about in the next few slides, realizing how can we keep a person at this level, right? I'd much rather have a little bit of forgetfulness, but where everyone can sort of know what they're expecting from me. They know, all right, we need to give Monica a few extra reminders, but that is constant, as opposed to if I had something greater that was happening and there was more of a greater decline. So this word dementia, it is a word that oftentimes, again, any presentation I give, people ask this question: what is dementia? How is that different from Alzheimer's disease? Dementia itself is a word that describes a group of symptoms. The symptoms are on the screen here where it says cognitive decline. So the symptoms are problems with your language, problems with memory, judgment, reasoning, and these are new problems. So there are people who are just really bad at directions. They're very directionally challenged, and they always have been. They don't have dementia. That's just how their brain works. There are people who are bad at names. You don't have dementia. You just can't remember names. And that's fine. I'm terrible with numbers. Terrible with numbers. Someone asks me a question along the lines like, how much did you pay for your car? And my answer will be, I don't know. And it's not that I don't really know, it's just I don't recall. I have to look it up because my brain doesn't work to remember numbers. I've always been like this. This is just how I am. People look at me funny sometimes. It's like, I can't believe you don't know how much you paid for your car. I'm like, well, I don't know. I've got it all balanced. It's on my spreadsheet. I have everything taken care of. I just can't retain that information and recall it. But that's always how I have been. So we see how we all have our baseline normal, but where dementia falls in to play is where these new changes are starting to impact this other column where we call your functional impairment. So now problems with your judgment is impacting your ability to take medication properly. Problems with your language is starting to impact your ability to pay bills because the words aren't making sense to you. So it's important, though, to know that this is not a normal part of aging. We all should be able to live to be 90 plus years old with good cognition and be sharp as a tack. You might be a little slower, but that's normal because I bet you probably run a little bit slower now than you used to run. So your brain's going to think a little bit slower than you used to, and that's just normal. So here's our umbrella talking about the word dementia and all the different types of dementias that exist. Again, we're not getting into this for the purposes of today, but I show this slide so that you realize that there are lots of different types of dementias. Alzheimer's disease is the most common form, but there's lots of different types, all have different progressions, and all have different pathologies and different causes. So Alzheimer's disease statistics, it is the leading cause of what we call a neurodegenerative dementia. Here in the United States, there's roughly 7 million Americans with Alzheimer's. It's the 5th leading cause of death in the US, 3rd here in California. The lifetime risk for a person with Alzheimer's disease at age 45 is 1 in 5 for women and 1 in 10 for men. Women are diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease more often than men are. And it's a really, really expensive disease, in terms of care, cost of care, either in-home care, also looking at lost wages. When you combine all of this, it's about $360 billion a year in healthcare costs here in the United States. So when we look at this world, and this slide here explains a person's normal, let's say, here's where we all hope to be, in this cognitively normal area, right? This is where we're active and we're talking and we're going out and maybe working, volunteering, etc. But realizing that the clinical stages of Alzheimer's disease could actually, and actually are, research has shown that they are starting when people are still normal. This red line is one of the hallmarks of Alzheimer's disease. It's called the amyloid plaques. These are starting to build while a person is still cognitively normal. The next line are the neurofibrillary tangles, which is the other hallmarks of Alzheimer's disease. Again, building when we are normal and we are still healthy and active. So if we're looking at how do we intervene, how do we make a difference, we need to try to find a way to impact change during this time of being cognitively normal. So Alzheimer's disease, as I mentioned, it's the prevalence of it, we're seeing more and more. Almost 2/3 of Americans with Alzheimer's are women. 1 in 9 people over the age of 65 have Alzheimer's, but we're also realizing a lot more, racial and ethnic disparities that exist with Alzheimer's disease. And this is an area of lots of research. And, we see that African Americans are twice as likely to develop Alzheimer's or another form of dementia. Hispanics are about 1.5 times as likely. For the purposes of this population, it's interesting to note that Asian Americans have a lower risk of developing Alzheimer's disease than other ethnic groups. But don't think you're out of the woods, because we look at, these different rates of dementia in ethnic communities. And as I mentioned, African Americans do have the highest occurrence, but we're still looking here that Asian Americans are about 28% risk of Alzheimer's disease. So it's just less than whites, but what we are seeing are more American influences and American cultural influences.
Hi, Monica. I think I'm having a little bit of a hard time hearing you. Maybe something with your mic happened? Charlene, can you hear Monica at this moment? No, George says no. Okay. Monica, we're having a hard time hearing you right now.
That's what I was just saying.
Okay.
Can you hear me now?
Okay, yes, can hear you.
My AirPods are nowhere near me, and my computer just said that they're switching over to AirPods. It's like, they're not even near me. Okay, good, I'm back.
We're good.
Okay, good.
Yes.
Okay, thanks. Okay. So one of the areas that I wanted to definitely talk about here, before we get into more like the brain health and the healthy lifestyle factors, is when we talk about, dementia across the globe, this is a major issue across the globe. It's not just an American issue. There are all different countries are impacted by Alzheimer's disease. In Japan, it actually has one of the highest prevalences of Alzheimer's in the world. Again, case in part because of the very large population, but realizing too that it's not just numbers of, it's also we're looking at prevalence. So for every 100,000 people, there's 3,000, roughly 3,000 cases of Alzheimer's disease. Japan is expected to have the highest dementia-related death rates by 2040. Some of the reasons why the researchers are seeing is due to smoking, so higher smoking population in Japan, low social activity, and low physical activity are some of the greatest risk factors for people in Japan, and also more of like the East Asian populations as well. So what can we do about this? How can we change this? How can we adjust our own personal dementia risk? Understanding that there is some role of genetics that play a part in all of our lives, but how we actually can sort of go against those genetics as well. So a little bit more about the Asian American community here in Los Angeles that we're seeing, or or Asian American community in general, that the Japanese Americans have an increased prevalence Alzheimer's disease versus other Asian American populations. Part of this we wonder too, is it so much a matter of the numbers are just higher, or is it also a matter of awareness could be more? We see if we're looking at, when I'm doing research for presentations like this, it's very hard to find good, solid numbers because unfortunately, there's so much research is just done on East Asian populations. Well, you all know that is a huge, there's so many different populations, so many different cultures that are under that greater umbrella. So it's really hard to find good data that is going to support lots of the whys behind this or help answer the whys that we have. So one thing though that we have seen, and this is sort of cross-culturally across, the African American population, the Latino population, Asian Americans, is this world of pride and family protection. We don't talk about these things. We don't bring our problems to other people, especially not outside of our nuclear family. So at that point, if you're pushing off, you're sort of keeping information to yourself longer, are you able to get early access to diagnostics, early access to better medical care? Or is it just one of those things, we're just going to take care of it over here? So for all of you coming here today, this is wonderful to have. Whenever I have groups, I'm always like, you're all the ones doing it right, because you're the ones who are willing to be here, willing to have these conversations, and hopefully willing to try a way to have a conversation with someone else or implement change in some ways, either in your life or in your family, your community, and those who surround you. We do see that in LA County specifically, we realize that the number of Asian Americans / Pacific Islanders is going to more than double. So these numbers of Alzheimer's disease is really going to increase here in our county. We have lots of barriers to try to overcome. And I know like Cairo does so much good work in trying to help with some of these things, like the language and socioeconomic barriers, helping caregivers identify as caregivers. And these are all big pieces that we always feel if we all work together, we can help spread the word and help try to raise the awareness of different health ailments, and have people help get some support for whatever might be coming down the road. So when we're thinking about some basic risk factors for Alzheimer's, we're talking age is your greatest one. Gender, as I mentioned, women more often than men. Genetics, but genetics don't play that strong of a role. We all have we get our genes from our parents. And of course, there's going to be genetic risks. If you have a parent who had high blood pressure, you're going to have a greater risk of having a high blood pressure. It's just genetics. It doesn't mean you are going to have high blood pressure. It just means your risk is going to be greater. So that's the same thing that we see with Alzheimer's disease. And then again, there is this one gene, the APOE4 gene, which has been very interesting when you read lots of the research about it. It varies across ethnicities in terms of a person's risk. So a Caucasian woman with 2 copies of the APOE4 gene have a pretty significant risk of having Alzheimer's disease. But African American women, their risk is not nearly as high as Caucasian women. And again, this is risk. It is not predictive. And so someone will say, I'll get tested for the gene, but it's not going to say that you're going to develop Alzheimer's disease. It's just going to say you have a greater risk or a lower risk, but you still have a basic risk. And we should be doing all of these interventions anyway, regardless of what our gene status is. So now we're going to sort of shift gears a little bit and talk more about actual ways. Oops, I'm skipping that because I'm skipping that one. All right, so talk more about ways of what can we do to change our Alzheimer's risk today. So this is a study that came out, just the 3rd version of it was released last year. It's the Lancet Commission on Dementia, Prevention, Intervention, and Care. And I know this slide is a little difficult to see, so bear with me. I will try to explain as much as I can, or clearly. So we have this image here on the right. So this image talks about our dementia risk. So at the beginning, this is early childhood, our early life. So 5% of our dementia risk is completely related to years of education, for under the age of 18. So we say, well, what? I'm not 18. I'm not 16. I'm pretty sure most of us in this group don't fall into that population. So how does this impact us? This is the area of policy. This is the area of supporting early childhood education. This is the area of reading to your grandchildren, talking to family members, volunteering at the library, finding these ways to educate into children up until the age of 18, really encouraging solid educational foundations. It makes a big difference actually in terms of a person's brain structure. They develop sort of what we call like a cognitive buffer due to education. As we learn, our brains actually grow and other areas strengthen. So we really want to encourage that world of early childhood education. In midlife, this research study has looked and shown how all of these different areas, so 45 to 65 years old, hearing loss accounts for 7% of your risk. High cholesterol, another 7%. Depression, traumatic brain injury, physical inactivity, diabetes, smoking, hypertension, overconsumption of alcohol, and obesity all contribute to dementia risk in your midlife. So, for example, if you have hearing loss and it is left untreated, you decide to be one of those stubborn individuals who says, I'm fine, I don't need hearing aids, I'm fine, then you are going to have greater risk of dementia due to that hearing loss. If you are one of the individuals who is not stubborn and who acknowledges that you can't hear and you get a hearing aid, then actually your dementia risk, like that part is cut out of a risk. So that is no longer a factor. So it's a matter of addressing these areas of concern and making sure that you are doing what you can to control for these areas. Later in life, your biggest risk factors are social isolation, air pollution, and vision loss. So if you look at this, you see how it's midlife really is where we can impact our dementia risk the most. So if you fall into this category, and let's say you aren't much of an exercise person, it's okay. Admit it. We've all been there. We've all had highs or lows in terms of our movement. We'll make tomorrow be the day that you decide, I'm going to go for that 5-minute walk. And then that's going to turn into maybe a 10-minute walk. And then maybe it's going to turn into a 15-minute walk. And next thing you know, you're walking a half hour every day. And it's small, gradual steps. And this is really where it can impact your brain health. So again, this study has been years in the making. It is continually changing and evolving. So this, if you are interested, this is a good place to just keep checking back on to see what can we do to improve our own personal dementia risk as we age. So this study is called the FINGER study. So the Finnish Geriatric Intervention Study to Prevent Cognitive Impairment and Disability. All these things have really big names. So this was one of the very first studies that focused on lifestyle factors. So the Lancet Commission that I just showed you sort of was based off of this. So this was a 2-year study that focused on dietary guidance, physical activity, cognitive training and social activities, as well as intensive monitoring and management of your metabolic and your vascular risk factors. So this study showed that if you really focus, and it's work, none of this is coming easy. None of this is a pill. All right. There isn't one pill that you can go and you can pick up and you go to get from CVS and it's going to make it better. That doesn't exist. If so, I would have started with that. But that's not the case. What it is work, and it is the importance of focusing on keeping your blood pressure normal at a good solid level. And that is often done by movement and diet. So by focusing in these areas, there is significant benefit on overall cognitive performance. This study has now expanded. It's now called the Worldwide Finger Study. So it's in the United States, Europe, Singapore, Australia, as well as other countries. Because what they're trying to figure out as well is how can this information be disseminated cross-culturally? Because the people in, let's say, South Dakota are going to eat very differently than the people in Sydney, who are going to eat very differently than somebody in Iceland. So we can't say you need to have avocados, olive oil, and 20 minutes of sunlight every day with good exercise, because maybe that's not possible for people in other areas. So how can this information be implemented cross-culturally? So I go back to this a lot because this is really one of the areas that researchers really are showing is the cardiovascular risk factors. So monitoring hypertension, stroke, diabetes, and high cholesterol. By controlling these areas, you are in fact going to control your dementia risk and other forms of Alzheimer's and other forms of dementias as well. So Mediterranean diet. Has anyone heard of the Mediterranean diet? Yes. Okay, great. Awesome. Here's a little chance for engagement here, so I can also get my sip of water. Did anyone here participate or adhere to portions of the Mediterranean diet? Some, yeah, okay. And I'll ask you to unmute. Feel free to unmute. How do you incorporate this into your diet?
Well, I do a lot less red meat, very little red meat anymore. Um, try to eat fish at least 4 times a week, and that could be like a tuna sandwich, salmon, or even like a can of sardines. Um, Usually not a whole lot of fruits, but steamed or sautéed vegetables in olive oil with garlic.
Great.
Um, I'm not sure if it's really good, but I do like um, peanuts. So
Mhm.
lightly salted peanuts are just great watching TV. Um, red wine, probably a little bit more than in moderation, but red wine's always good. And actually, I just found a really good recipe for refried bean soup.
Oh,
And this has kind of come along recently since I've kind of had to change my diet by necessity.
okay. Okay. Well, good for you for making the changes that are necessary. Um, anyone else find other ways to incorporate this into their diet? Yeah, as many veggies as possible is good. Um, I also say what the point of this is, at least is it's not saying, hey, ditch the diet that you're used to. And now let's jump and, eat more of a Mediterranean diet. That's not it at all. It's how do you start to incorporate more of these things into your diet? So if you are making, dinner, let's put some more vegetables in there. Um, yes, Alice put in the chat, making your own salad dressing. That's an amazing way to A, save money, and then B, completely cut down on sugars and fats. Because salad dressings are terrible for you when you buy the store-bought stuff. They really are. If you ever I don't know if you want to look at the ingredients or the calorie content, but they really are. It's a great way to, also mix it up a little bit for you. But finding things that you enjoy as well. When I've done this presentation, someone's like, well, I don't really like fish. So what do I do? Or I'm allergic to fish. What do I do? And then I say, then don't eat fish. Like it's not going to be that great of a benefit if you are like, oh, I gotta eat salmon and you just hate the taste. Well, don't eat salmon. Find other areas to get the good omega-3 fatty acids, the good fats. Find other things that you do enjoy. It is cutting back on red meats, maybe adding more lean meats, more chicken, more turkeys, finding ways to add, again, more vegetables. Nuts are a really amazing food that I think is often underutilized. So finding the way to incorporate it. And yes, red wine in moderation. So I guess it all depends upon what the size of your glass is. You say, oh, I only had 2 glasses of wine, but it all depends on what the size of your glasses were. So making sure that you are being mindful of that and just cognizant in terms of your diet. The other area that research is showing is social network size. How it really, people who are much more socially engaged do better longer. They have this opportunity, like the engagement really does, it gets you off your seat, right? It gets you thinking, it gets you stimulated. It gets you to the point where maybe you're now having like these really great stimulating conversations and you're thinking about new things that you may not have thought about. So social network, there has been the complete connection between disease pathology and cognitive functioning. Assuming that everything else is equal, the people who have a greater social network are going to do better long term. So again, finding things that you enjoy though. Because if I say, all right, everyone, we're going to meet now, we're going to meet next month. So what we're going to do in this month, we're all going to knit a blanket. And this is what we're going to do. We're going to get together. We're going to have a group. It's going to be a great group. It's going to be fun to be together and we're going to knit. And those of you who can't stand knitting are like, why is she making me do this? This seems miserable. I don't enjoy this. I don't get this. I don't know how to move everything around. This is so hard. And it's not going to be of benefit to you. So let's make sure that what you do are things that you love and things that you enjoy. So give me some examples of things that you do. And again, you can unmute, you can write it in the chat. Activities that you do that you find are stimulating for your brain.
You can do volunteer work.
Wonderful. That's wonderful. Yes, volunteer work. Absolutely.
You can exercise with a group or friends.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Exercising with groups or friends.
Go to church.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Anyone here do any sort of like mindfulness or meditation? That's another great way to be able to help improve the stimulation in your brain. Oftentimes people are like, oh, I'm going to learn a new language. In reality, how many of us are learning a new language? Right? People say, oh, this is what we should do for our brain. Yes, it is good, but is that actually going to be something that you can do? Because what we want is it to be something that is sustainable for you, because then that's going to make you feel better. As opposed to I started a new language and then I completely faded. So we want, again, for you to be engaged. We want you to feel successful and be proud of yourself in terms of the work that you are doing.
The group activities like Tai Chi or pickleball.
Yes, absolutely. Yes. Pickleball, though, you have to be careful. I've heard of lots of people who get injured playing pickleball. My friend's husband blew out his Achilles playing pickleball. So yeah, be careful. But yes, but that's it. Oh, Sudoku. There we go. Now we're getting things typed in here. Perfect. Yes, online cooking classes or in-person cooking classes. Wonderful. And yes, it's the world of the group. I really believe in that. When we were all in lockdown during COVID, we saw numbers really increase in terms of people's cognitive complaints. Well, what were we? Isolated, depressed, alone, not exercising. So we're sort of doing everything that is the opposite of what this class is. Probably not eating right. So we think about this way of how can we keep ourselves engaged, and socialization is huge. So looking at this study that came out 2011, so it's a little bit older, but it still is a very relevant study. So I'll explain this a little bit more. So this was a 1-year study. At the beginning of the study, all of the older adults had an MRI, a baseline image of their brain. And they measured this part of the brain, the little yellow part, which is called the hippocampus. So the hippocampus is the part of the brain that turns short-term memories into long-term memories. So it's a crucial part of our brain for cognition and for memory. So the people in this group were MRI beginning of the year, 6 months, and then 1 year later. And then they put people into 2 different groups, cardiovascular exercise or stretching. The people who were in the cardiovascular exercise group actually saw growth in their hippocampus. So it showed that their brain actually grew during this year due to the cardiovascular exercise. So, the higher aerobic fitness was associated with better memory, which is important, right? And also it showed over a longer period of time that they were able to sustain that higher level of cognition. So lots of different ways to be engaged and to exercise. I like to say, instead of exercise, I like to just use the word movement. Exercise to me sometimes is daunting, right? You need to know what to do. You need to find the right class. You need to get the right equipment and maybe the right outfit. But if you're moving, that's just something we do every day. So how can we move more? How can you move more? And again, think about your physical limitations. Think about what your abilities are, and how can you increase that? My dad has been fairly sedentary for the past month, and I've been on him. And he looks at me, he's like, well, my gym's been closed for remodel. So he's been using that as his excuse. I said, Dad, 1 mile a day or 20 minutes on your bike. Walking, like walk around the neighborhood for 1 mile or 20 minutes on your bike. That's it. Small and attainable. So see what works for you and find the ways to just get more movement going. Another area of research that is talking a lot about air quality. This is something, and actually right now, a very topical for our purposes being here in Los Angeles. There are lots of studies that are kicked off right away that are studying the effects of wildfire smoke and people's dementia risk. We live in Los Angeles, so chances are pretty good that in some way, shape, or form, we were all impacted to a certain extent during the fires in January. So what kind of long-term impact is that going to have on people's brain health? So research is looking at that, looking at fine particulate matter to see people who have that they're, excuse me, that where areas where there is greater fine particulate matter, they've actually seen an increase in Alzheimer's disease numbers. So again, looking maybe greater policy issues with looking at health and wellness and improving air quality around us. So sleep and Alzheimer's disease is always a big one. And I know I have just a few more minutes left, so I will make sure that we get to this. And if you have questions, put things in the chat and I can answer them also while I am presenting too, so we can, make sure we get all of your questions answered. But the sleep, I think, is a really big piece. We live in a society that almost praises people to not get sleep. We get celebrated if you're like, oh, I stayed up until midnight working on that project. And everyone's like, good job, Kent. That was wonderful. No one was saying, wow, Kent, you didn't sleep last night. Everyone's just like, wow, you stayed up late and you did that. Or did you binge watch that TV show? I watched that for all these hours and I stayed up late until 2 watching that. And we almost get celebrated for that. But in reality, what we need is we need proper rest. In our brains, when we sleep, it is our body's chance to heal from the damage from the day before. And this could be stress, it could be toxins, it could be environment. So while you are sleeping, when your brain is in a nice deep sleep, that's when there are these little things in your brain called microglia, and they come and they sort of clean up lots of the gunk in the brain. So the amyloid plaque that I mentioned earlier, which is one of the hallmarks of Alzheimer's disease, the microglia actually come through and clean that up. So if you have sleep apnea or other type of sleep disturbance, and you are sleeping, and the microglia is there and it's working and it's doing its job, and then all of a sudden you wake up, they quit. They quit for the night. So whatever is left is just left there. It didn't get properly cleaned up. And then over time, there is an accumulation of this beta amyloid in the brain. So this study showed that people with fragmented sleep actually had an increase risk of Alzheimer's disease because of the increase of these proteins in their brain. So if you have sleep apnea, talk to your doctor. Find a way to, take care of that CPAP machine, whatever it needs to be, so that you sleep soundly. If you have to get up in the middle of the night to go to the restroom, that's very different because your body gradually wakes up for that. That's not a sudden wake up like sleep apnea. That's a sudden, but if you have to go to the bathroom, you're slowly thinking, oh, I should get up. Oh, I should get up. No. And then you finally get up. So this is a very different type of wake. So sometimes people will ask me like, well, what about that? Like I have to use the restroom at night. It's like, that's fine. As long as you can go back to sleep. It's more of the sudden awakenings that can actually impact your Alzheimer's disease risk. Hearing, as we mentioned earlier, especially so if you have cardiovascular risk factors and you have poor hearing, your risk of Alzheimer's or another type of dementia increases. But if you don't have those cardiovascular risk factors, the hearing loss isn't as great of a risk. So again, another reason to move, to eat right, keep your cardiovascular risk factors lower and more managed as well. So this was a study that looked at a 3-year period of time focusing again on general health, cardiovascular risk, as well as age. So this was actually one of the first ones that came out recently, relating hearing loss with a dementia risk increase. So again, being mindful of it, knowing who you are, knowing what your health levels are. So when we think about what can we do to change our dementia risk, there are a few things. First of all, we can decide to stop aging, find the fountain of youth and go bathe in it every day. The next one we could do is we can go back in time, find the right parents with some solid genes, and hope that that would work. Most likely we can't do either of those, but what can we do? We can eat a healthy diet, focus more on Mediterranean diets, more fruits, vegetables, diets high in antioxidants, control for hypertension and high cholesterol, keep your mind and your body active, and protect your brain. Like, wear a helmet if you do anything on a bike. Look both ways when you cross the street. I know that sounds very simple, right? We told our children this when they're little, look both ways, but how often do we? If there's any of those like bird scooters or electric scooters in your neighborhood, keep an eye out for those people. You can't trust them. Wear seatbelts. Find ways that you can protect your brain, to be able to help prevent or reduce your own dementia risk. So I think that brings me up to time. So yes, excellent. So again, thank you for being here. Thank you. I have time for questions. If anyone has any, you can either unmute or put it in the chat. And this is my contact information. If you think of anything later, it's like, oh, I should have asked Monica that. Just send me an email. I'm fairly accessible. If you have questions, please, by all means, let me be a resource to you where I can help you, get those questions asked. If you have any personal questions that you don't want to ask today in front of other people, that's fine too. Just shoot me an email and I'll be happy to help you and work with you on, whatever may arise. So thank you so much for this opportunity.
Thank you so much, Monica. I speak for all of us in saying that was such an informative and comprehensive presentation, and I learned so much, especially the point about air quality and air pollution. I was an environmental science major, so making all those connections and how, everything in our environment and our genetics can have an influence on our health and long-term longevity. So
Completely.
yeah, thank you. And as Monica mentioned, if you have any questions, please author them in the chat or feel free to unmute. We have one already that says, are there any links between aneurysms and cognitive impairment?
Oh, completely. It all depends upon where is the aneurysm, because essentially that would be something that would go like, it's going to impact your brain. So if there's any sort of anything that occurs to your brain, in fact, it could impact your cognition. So your brain, different areas of it control different things. So there's some areas that will, excuse me, let's say control your thinking. Some may control your movement more. Some may control your recollection, your reasoning, your judgment. So it all depends on if you had some sort of a brain aneurysm, where did that occur in the brain? And then that would most likely be the area where there will be some sort of deficit. So talking to your doctor, trying to get a better image of where that occurred so you can also know how to adjust. It may not be that it's going to say, you now have Alzheimer's disease. It's not that kind of a correlation. It'd be more of a vascular dementia that people would have to be aware of for that.
Thank you. I see Jeannie also asked, let's see, when would you recommend getting a baseline cognitive test?
I would say as soon as you think about needing a baseline cognitive test. So it's important to have that kind of information. So then your doctor knows, okay, what's your normal? Because as I mentioned, your normal is different than my normal. So then how can we then see what the changes have been? Yes, there are standardized tests and people can come in and take a test and we can figure out where your cognition is. But again, if they ask me numbers, like I know one of the questions, it's count backwards from 100 by sevens. Oh my gosh, I'm totally going to fail. I'll get to 93 and then call it good. After that, I'm like, So it would be unfair for me to be for that to be, what my level of cognition is, considering I know I'm going to fail it already. And I work in this field. I should just try to memorize those. But so that's why I think it is important to get baseline evaluations. Now, like Medicare does encourage, or Medicare does offer the like a cognitive exam after the age of 65. But those are a few basic questions that would more or less flag a problem. I think it's important to try to get a baseline exam where it's more in depth than just asking a few questions. So then again, if you need to go back in 5 years, they can come back and they can say, okay, so Jeannie was here and now she's here. Let's see what may have occurred. Were there any cardiovascular incidences? Has there been depression? What has occurred that may have changed her numbers? Or are we looking at now we need to find a different way to intervene?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Very good information. Let's see. One person said, any advice for someone with a spouse who refuses to get evaluated, even though they are showing symptoms of cognitive impairment?
If I had a magic wand on that one, if I had a magic answer, man, I'd give that out to everybody. I wouldn't even sell it. I'd just give that out because, gosh, that is hard. What I have heard, again, your partner, what works for them and what doesn't. Maybe trying to have this matter of like saying, you know what, we're both 72 years old. We both should go in and get some evaluation. Where you go with them. And so it's not attacking them because they're fine. They're fine. Remember that they are fine. In their mind, they are perfectly fine. So how can you say, we need to do this? Or is it, well, we need to take care of some legal documents. It'd be best if we both got some, had some testing and evaluation so we know where we're at for these legal documents. If you have grandchildren, sometimes grandchildren or children actually could be helpful in these areas where it's not a nagging spouse, it's a caring child. It's like, Dad, I really want you to be around and I'm sort of concerned. How can we try to help here? I know that there's often the challenges in terms of respect of your parent and of your elder, but finding the right ways to maybe sort of just talk about it, having it be more of a casual conversation. Maybe at dinner, your adult child can say, oh, like, I don't know how somehow this can come up, but oh, my friend's parents, they were just doing this. I think it's such a great thing. I'm thinking of doing it too. I'm trying to normalize some of these tests. Again, we normalize cholesterol tests. We normalize mammograms. We normalize colonoscopies. Why can't we start to normalize cognitive testing as well?
Thank you for that. I think, yeah, we really need a culture shift.
Mm-hmm.
For normalizing.
And that also, some of that too is some of the work that we're doing at UCLA is like we're working with clinicians to help them understand like what their role truly is as well. Because it's not just a matter of, oh, you're 85, what do you expect?
Mm-hmm.
So that script needs to change as well, even within our medical system as well.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And I understand UCLA is one of the leaders in terms of, thinking about innovative ways to do research and find innovative solutions to cognitive impairment.
Yeah. And I know, again, we reach a big area whenever we do these Zoom presentations. And again, if you want to come to UCLA, we'd love to have you. We'd love to see you. If you live closer to USC, that's okay. It's okay. Just don't cheer for their football team. That's all we care about. But it's okay because we're partners with research with them. We're partners. I refer to them, find your medical company that you, or a practice that you feel comfortable with. That is what matters. If you come to UCLA, great. But if you don't, just get care and just make sure you are at a practice that you feel comfortable with, because that is the way that it will be sustainable for you.
Thank you. Even though I'm a Bruin, I,
Hey,
I endorse that
Go Bruins,
message too.
right? I'm just saying, so.
Yes. And then I believe we have 2 more questions, and we have time for 2 more questions before the closeout slides. But John asked, are puzzles and games helpful for brain health?
Completely. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. But here's my little caveat. So, okay, so everyone says crossword puzzles, right? Crossword puzzles, good for your brain. What type of memory do crossword puzzles rely upon? Short-term memory or long-term memory? Long-term memory, because you need to know the 6-letter word that is the name of that actor, right? But what kind of memory do people have the most complaints about? Short-term.
Okay.
So while crossword puzzles are great, brain stimulation, it gets it going, it's pulling things out, 100%. If you're really concerned about short-term memory, that's not the best exercise. More like word searches, where it's here's this word, look for it here. That is an option. Those are good. Sudoku, that is also good for short-term memory. Not for people like me who hate math and numbers, but for other people. So finding these types of things. But yes, they are important, but I don't like when people put so much pressure on it where they're going to sit around all day. They're not going to do anything, but they're going to do their puzzles. What actually would do them more good is if they went for a walk. So puzzles are important, but that's not going to be your be all and end all for protecting your brain from dementia. Exercise is probably would go exercise, diet, and then brain games if we're talking about a hierarchy of things that can have the most impact.
Thank you. And I was mistaken. That was our last question. I want to again say thank you for all the knowledge you imparted on us just now, Monica. We really appreciate your partnership and educating all of us. And with that, I will end with the closeout slides for today. Yes. So as we close out, I'd like to do a quick poll for you all. You may recognize these questions from the registration, as well as one question asking about your availability, just to get a better sense for future programming. If this time works with you, or say the morning or afternoon, evening works better, we'd love your feedback, and please respond to the poll if you're able to. All right. Thank you all who participated. Natalie, I see you had some technical difficulties, but we'll be sure to reach out if you still have questions afterward. And as we close out, I'd like to thank our donors. We really appreciate all your support. With your generous contributions, we're able to continue programming like this. I'd like to also share our upcoming classes. Monica mentioned a lot about sleep today. So if you'd like to learn from Cedars-Sinai on the importance of why sleep is important for your brain, please join us at the end of the month, as well as a scam security class presented by Denise Oki of the FTC in May. And Cato is very excited to announce that we are entering the board and care space. We've purchased our first property in the South Bay, and if you're interested in learning more, please visit cato.org/survey. We've also mentioned this program a few times now, but the in-person event is at capacity. However, we still have unlimited spots for virtual programming. If you'd like to learn more about how to get the conversation going on advanced planning for the whole family, please join us in 2 weeks. And lastly, thank you so much, everyone, for sticking around a little past 3 today. We really enjoy seeing your faces and getting your engagement every month. And if you found this valuable, please share with friends and family or consider a monetary donation. Thank you so much. And please have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you.